Today, as we gather together, we are joining you from the land where stories have been passed from one generation to the next, spoken, remembered, and carried like treasures. These lands have always been places where people listened carefully, learned from one another, and shared who they were through story. We gratefully acknowledge that we live, work, learn, play, and read on the traditional and unceded territories of the Hunkaminam speaking peoples, stewards of the land and of the story since time immemorial.
In this webinar, we will go through the following questions. What is a diversity audit? Why should we do a diversity audit? How do we do a diversity audit? And what do we do once we've completed a diversity audit?
Hello and welcome. We are really glad that you are here joining us from teacher-librarian spaces all across British Columbia. This video is an invitation to pause, reflect, and look closely at the work we do every day in libraries. Before we begin, I would like to express deep gratitude to Rebecca Rubio for the groundbreaking work and thinking that helped shape this journey, to the support of our strategic plan in Richmond School District 38, which gave this work purpose and direction, and to Baron Suey, our diversity, equity, and inclusion district consultant, who worked tirelessly over a 5-year span to carefully hone and develop the audit process that brings us to this moment. Together, we have now audited all 47 of our libraries. That work matters. Today, we are here to share a streamlined process, one you can model your own audit after in your own space. You will hear from fellow teacher librarians throughout the video, each sharing how they approach different parts of the audit and how it comes to life in their libraries. There are no set rules. It will look different in each space and with each teacher librarian. That is not only expected, it is welcome. We invite you to watch with curiosity rather than comparison. Take what fits your context and leave the rest. We each commit to being mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors for our communities. These audits are just one way that we can check our work, reflect honestly, and keep our goals alive and on target. We will begin with a teacher librarian who will model the first part of the audit, offering one way this work can live in a real library space. With that, let's begin.
Welcome to Comset Library. Here at Comset, we have about 21 divisions, which is about 490 students. We have a large population of Asian students and Muslim students, and my goal has been to create a collection that represents them, but also opens them up to a broader perspective. I am lucky enough to work full-time, and my big goal since I've been in the library for about 4 years now has been to help every kid see themselves as a reader. Why are diversity audits important? Well, they ensure that everyone who enters the LLC has access to high-interest, high-quality material that reflect a wide range of lived experiences, while also helping students understand the diversity of the broader community around them. For me, when I moved to Canada many years ago, I used to bring all sorts of lunches from home, and they were lunches from my culture. Lots of students were not familiar with lunches like mine, and they honestly thought that they were gross. So I learned very quickly that I needed to bring white bread sandwiches, and that's what I did from grade 4 all the way up to grade 12. And I wonder if my experience would have been different if I had had access to books about foods from my culture, or if students around me had access to books from my culture? Would they have been more accepting? Would I have been more proud of who I am? Would other people have seen what I was eating and perhaps would have been interested in it as well? So what I did when I became a teacher librarian was create a text set of world foods here at Tomset. One of the books in this text set is Luli and the Language of Tea. This book is about a little girl who brings tea to her class, and all the students in her class talk about the different languages that they say tea in. It's actually really amazing. And when I read it to my students at Tomset, they were so excited to put up their hands and share their word for tea. Another great book is Everyone Loves Lunchtime But Zia. This is all about a little girl. She kind of reminds me of me. And she brings in her lunches. And at first, everyone is like, oh, what are you eating? But after that, as she shares her special lunch boxes, kids become more and more interested in what she's bringing. Now, this was really great for my students because these were lunches that they had themselves. They were so excited to teach me how to pronounce the different foods and to share with each other the kinds of things that they were bringing. This right here is why diversity is important. What is a diversity audit? A diversity audit is a close look at the resources that are available in your library learning commons. It helps to collect data and get a clear snapshot of who is represented in our collection and who might be missing. It helps us figure out with clear data how well we are representing and supporting diverse identities, perspectives, and experiences. By pausing to think about equity, diversity, and representation, we can see what we're doing well and where the gaps in our collection are. This isn't just data for the sake of data. It helps us make intentional decisions about future purchasing and curation.
Books are windows to see into other worlds. They're sliding doors to step into other people's shoes. But they're also a soft place to land. In a school library, books are often the first place a student looks to see if they belong. A diversity audit asks a simple, powerful question. Who can see themselves here, and who can't yet? The process doesn't begin and end with the books. It asks us to look at our communities. It provokes us to really notice the people walking through our doors. Who feels welcome right now? Who lingers? And who passes by quietly? It's about paying attention, making space. It's about holding room for many identities, many stories, many ways of being. By looking closely, we learn more about our collections, our communities, and ourselves. This work opens doors, gently and with care.
Now that we've covered the what and the why, let's look at the how. Now, I won't lie, this process is long and tedious, but worth it. The first step is deciding which part of your collection you want to audit. Perhaps you've noticed that the fantasy section features mostly male protagonists and you want to confirm your findings. Pick an area and let the audit help you identify whose voices are missing. Picture books can be quite tricky to audit because we often rely on the images to tell the story, and it's hard to get definitive answers about a character's race or ethnicity without making broad judgments. For your first go-around, I highly suggest novels. Next, decide who will conduct the audit. This might be you, colleagues, your library technician. Collaboration and open conversation are the key to doing a diversity audit. There are going to be times when you need to talk things through with a colleague, lean on others, or better yet, work together. Once you have your team, determine your sample size. It should be manageable but still representative. In Richmond, we audited about 150 to 300 titles over 4 days. It was exhausting, but doable. Remember, you are not auditing every single book in your library. You are simply looking for a representative snapshot of what's there. In a few moments, we will go over how to generate randomized book lists to keep the audit as unbiased as possible. Keep in mind, some books will take you a few minutes to audit, while others may take 20 to 30 minutes, so keep it manageable. Finally, choose your tracking tools. In Richmond, we used an Excel sheet that our amazing library technicians set up for us. We have all the markers listed at the top for both the protagonist and the author, and we went through and marked off all the ones that applied to the title that we were auditing.
Once you know what you're auditing, decide what information you want to gather and if it's possible to find that information. This step is going to be very personal based on your goals. Ask yourself, what do I want to learn from this audit? There's no universal template. Your markers should reflect your students, your community, and your province. Remember, we want our collection to be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. When thinking about my library, my goal was to curate more books around Muslim voice, Asian voice, and also my students really wanted books about different types of families. They wanted to see non-nuclear families in our collection. They didn't want two-parent households. They wanted single parents. They wanted adoptive parents. They wanted foster parents. So that has been my goal for this year.
Once you know what part of your collection you're auditing, it's time to decide what information you want to gather, and if it's possible to find that information. We call the information that we're looking for markers. This step is very personal and based on your goals. Ask yourself, what do I want to learn from this audit? There's no universal template. Your markers should reflect your students, your community, and your province. Remember, we want our collection to be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. The key is selecting markers that will help you make meaningful decisions for future curation. Some examples of markers include race, sexuality, gender, own voice, Canadian, really anything you can think of.
A diversity audit is, at its heart, a research process, and it takes time and thought. We want to learn about the voices who shape our stories. This includes both the protagonists and the authors. We gather information about the books from many different sources. For example, we read book reviews and community comments on sites like Goodreads. We visit publisher websites and author pages. We look to interviews, articles, and trusted education-evaluated resources, including focused education reviews. Sometimes we follow authors on social media to better understand how they describe their own work and identities. Sometimes we compare multiple sources to notice patterns or inconsistencies. And sometimes we seek careful assistance from AI to help surface information we may not easily find on our own. This is not about quick answers. This is about building understanding over time. The research helps us notice whose voices are present, whose stories are being told with lived experiences, and where gaps still exist in our collections. This is how we listen more closely.
Now that you've determined what you will be auditing, the tools you will be using, and the markers you will track, it is time to begin data collection. Start by setting up your tracking sheet. Create 2 sections, one for the protagonist and one for the author. In each section, record the book title and the author's name. Next, list your chosen markers across the top of the table. In this example, the focus is on race with the following categories: white, black, Chinese, Korean, Indian, and Pakistani. The book selected from the random sample is Booked by Kwame Alexander. Begin by entering the title and author information in both sections. Then, starting with the protagonist, check all the boxes that reflect how the protagonist identifies. Repeat the same process for the author section. If desired, you may also choose to track additional factors, such as whether the book is own voice or whether the author is Canadian.
In this section, we will talk about how to create a random sample. Once you've chosen a section of your collection, the next step is deciding what you'll actually look at. So for most of us, this means working with a random sample rather than every single title. This keeps the work manageable while still giving us meaningful data. So step 1, you're going to generate a shelf list from the library system that you work with. In Richmond, we've been using Destiny, and so we create a shelf list from fiction A to fiction Z and output it as an Excel spreadsheet. Once you've created and downloaded that spreadsheet, you're going to clean up the list. So take a moment to delete the duplicates and take out information that's not necessary for the audit. This includes things like how many copies you have or the purchase price of the book. You don't need that for this data. Don't worry about this being perfect. Your goal here is to create a working list that you can use. Step 3 is you're going to add random number column. This is how we'll randomize the list. So in the next column to your data, you're going to add a new column and just call it random. And in the first cell, type the formula =, capital RAND, open bracket and closed bracket. This is the formula that will generate a random number for each title. Once you've inputted that, it's going to give you a unique number right next to that first book title in your list. You want to create a random number for every book that's in your list. So click on the little green tab in the lower right corner of that first random number and drag it all the way down to the bottom of your list. Then hit enter. That's going to give every single title a random number. The next step is to apply that random and sort them. So right-click in any of those random number cells and select Sort. Now you're going to sort either highest to lowest or lowest to highest. It doesn't matter because these numbers are random. So they're not assigned in any order. Once you hit sort, they will randomly sort. This is going to rearrange your list into a complete random order. Then from there, you choose your sample size. So for example, maybe you're going to audit 100 or 200 titles or 300. It really depends on your time and your capacity. But these become the books that you'll audit more closely. It's okay to start small. Even a sample of 50 titles can reveal meaningful patterns. Once you have your sample, copy those titles into a new sheet. This can become your tracking tool. Across the top, create columns for the data that you've decided to track. These are your markers, and they might include title, author, protagonist identity, author identity, themes or topics, and you might want to have a column that you allow for notes or questions. Try to keep your tracking sheet simple and consistent. Your goal is not to capture everything. It's to make patterns visible. This process might feel technical at first, but it does get easier as you go. And what matters most is not the spreadsheet itself, but what it helps you see. Looking at the tally of the sums at the bottom of the Excel spreadsheet, as you can see on this slide, you will have your numbers showing representation in the random sample that you just audited. Take those numbers and put them into a chart that collates your data points. So you're going to look at the total number of books that you audited. On this slide, you're seeing that this teacher librarian audited 252 books. And then the sum of the books that were counted. So in this example, for the marker he, she, and they, 95 books were authored by a male, authored by someone who identifies as she, her, and one by someone who identifies as they. Compared to the number of books in the total sample, 252, that represents male authorship at 38%, female authorship at 62%, and authorship by people identifying as they
as 0 because 1 out of 252 is statistically insignificant. It doesn't even equal 1%. And you can continue looking at that data then to see the percentage of your books that represent each of the markers that you had chosen to mark for. This is where the story lies. Now you take this data and you decide how to diversify your collection. You can identify those gaps, and you can even see gaps within gaps. This work is so powerful when it's done in collaboration with a partner or with a group of partners. So we highly recommend that while you're doing a diversity audit, buddy up with another teacher librarian who's doing the same work at the same time as you so that you can have some of these conversations and you have a partner to turn to when you're not sure what the next step is.
Looking back on the diversity audit that we did, rather than talk about the end results, which I do have to say were very valuable, I learned, for instance, that in my fiction section, I only had 14% Canadian authors, and I learned some other amazing things. That was so valuable, but I'd just like to reflect on the process itself. There we were, a room full of teacher librarians, and although we are part of a school community as teacher librarians, we're always working with others, we still do have a unique position in the school. You know, the only person who really understands everything that we do is another teacher librarian. So being together with others of our own kind to do this amazing work was very exciting and inspiring. For this time, we really became a community of librarians. And we were all working towards our goal to take a look at a randomly selected group of books and to analyze them using markers, markers of gender or nationality or some other diversity, ability, or other things that we took note of. And this was both the authors of the books or the characters, the main characters. So this very first step that we did, deciding which markers to use, this process quickly brought us together. We had to consider our own biases in making these decisions, our own assumptions, and our preconceived ideas. And then we had to make decisions about which geographic regions and which identities that we would use. This led to many conversations, which helped, especially, it really helped me understand the importance of what we were doing. And it just made everything deeper and clearer. And I understood then that really this very beginning process, this process of defining what we were going to do and how we were going to do it, what we were using to measure our diversity audit, was so important, and it was as important as the actual final results and the final analysis itself.
Once you've gathered your information, it's time to make sense of your data. Start by looking at patterns. Are there certain identities showing up repeatedly? Are the same types of characteristics dominating your sample? Then identify the gaps. Whose perspectives are missing? Which groups are underrepresented? These insights will help you guide purchasing and curation for the future. This step is where the data starts to tell the story of your collection and helps us plan for meaningful growth.
One way to set goals is by examining existing population data. According to the 2021 census, 34% of British Columbia's population identifies as a visible minority, 29% are immigrants, and 29% live with a disability. You may choose to have your collection reflect these proportions. For example, do 29% of the characters in your collection have a disability? Is there a representative number of books that depict the immigrant experience? Do you want your library collection to align with these statistics? Or is there something else you're looking for?
So curating books for the French immersion collection and looking for diverse voice is a challenging task. Mainly because when we're looking at French publishers, we're not just looking at the ones publishing here in Canada, but obviously in other parts of the world. And they're not publishing with the same lens that we are necessarily looking at as North American publishers. So it's challenging to find those books that will represent the different voices that we have. And our school is diverse. And so we have kids from all over the world that come to our school, and trying to help find stories that are going to look like them is hard, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. But it does add a certain layer of challenge. So when we curate in French, we often start by looking at blogs of organizations or teachers that are specifically curating for schools and high school kids. That'll be the first place that we'll look. And then we'll start looking at publishing houses, the ones that we're familiar with. But every time we're looking at a source, we're also looking at who the author is. And if they're writing about, for example, Syrian refugees, then are they from the Assyrian heritage? If we're looking at LGBTQ, is the author's writing about LGBTQ stories, are they from that community? And so, that overall is quite, it adds a layer of challenge when we're looking for books. It also means that we're sometimes having to buy translations, which is not our favorite thing to do when we're looking for authentic voices, but we have succeeded in locating some of those resources. So for example, we make a display like this, and we'll make it in both French and English. This one being for women's International Women's Day, which was on Sunday. We're highlighting authors and women's voices. And so we have women's voices from Iran. We've got voices of Black women, Asian women, Vietnamese. We try to find what we can in French in order to try to represent that diversity of voice. It's a lot of work. We've lost our local person that used to come in and help us do our book purchasing. So now we have to do the work ourselves. So for example, as we're talking about diverse authors, this is Kim Thuy. Her book was actually part of Canada Reads several years ago, Rue, and has won the Governor General's Award. She's actually francophone as an immigrant from Vietnam. So when we get books like this to tell her story, it's an autobiography. We know that like Kim is a Vietnamese person who immigrated here from Canada, and that this is her story. And it's published in multiple voices or in multiple languages is what I wanted to say. But this is an author that we know. But sometimes we know the authors a little less, and we have to actually look them up. So for example, this one, Les Impatients, from Djali Amadou Amal, is representing African voices. And even though we have a small community here in our district, it's still important to make sure that those voices are represented. So again, this would be a
an author that when we found the book, and while it looks like it's an African voice and the name might be that, we would go and research the author even further to determine whether or not they are representing their own voices in their writing. Another great one that we found, a lot of you might know Marjane Satrapi, who wrote Persepolis. It was written in French first, but she's an Iranian author, and this is her second published book after Persepolis in graphic novel format, where she recounts the story of the women who revolted a few years ago by cutting all of their hair against the Iranian regime. So these are some of the examples of authors that we've looked up. And one of the things that's been a bit easier to find are these compilation ones where they look at women, because we're talking about International Women's Day. These are all stories of multiple women, but they don't just tell the stories of white women. They tell the stories of women who have done extraordinary things from around the world. So we have a variety of these stories, books that hold collections of them. And so that's one of the ways that we try to find that authentic voice, but it is a lot of work. We will find the resource, have to do some research on each author to make sure that what they are writing about, if it's LGBTQ or a certain culture, that they belong to that culture.
So one of the things that we do just to promote the joy of reading, of course, we have some incentive programs that we run throughout the year, and the Richmond Reading Riot is a long-standing incentive program that we've done across many high schools in the district for over a decade now. And when we're curating books for this, of course, we're thinking, what kind of stories are kids going to want to read? What are they going to be excited about? And we have chosen to sort of divide it between long form novels and graphic novels, all kind of separated by genre. And when we're curating these books, we also see this as an opportunity to bring underrepresented voices to the forefront. And so we're really conscientious and thoughtful in how we curate the books that we promote with our whole school community. This is a reading incentive that takes place outside of curriculum, outside of classrooms, purely for joy, but it is also an opportunity to make sure that students have access to stories that they might not pick up on their own. And so we've been really careful about bringing stories that might stay in the shadows out into the light during these incentives. And what we've noticed, because we are able to track how many kids are reading these books, and they all submit ballots where they rate the books as part of the Richmond Reading Riot, we get to see how they react to those stories. And the reaction, even if it's not their favorite book, many of the comments that we receive from students is around how enlightening or life-changing it is to read a story that they wouldn't have read otherwise. And so it's really powerful to see how students react to those stories. And I think overwhelmingly, the response is really positive around reading stories that they might not have picked up on their own.
Okay, so let me introduce you to a living example of diversity in my library. This is our Indigenous Peoples collection. In Richmond, we were one of the pilot schools to introduce this. We wanted to make sure that the Indigenous experience was highlighted. So we pulled out all of the books from the collection and we gave it its own space in our library. This is highlighted. I sit right here, so the collection is right here. And as you can see, we have broken it up into the different areas. So we've got our Coast Salish collection. Teachers can come right here when they want to read books about Coast Salish peoples. And this book right here, The Game, this was part of our Battle of the Books last year, where all the books highlighted were written by Indigenous peoples and featured Indigenous characters. And as you can see, this one won the Tom Set Battle of the Books Award.
Collection development is where this work lives. What we learn through a diversity audit changes how we see our shelves permanently. Once we have noticed whose voices are missing or underrepresented, we cannot unsee it. Teacher-Librarians in Richmond consistently report that this process shifts perspective. It changed purchasing habits, it changed workflows, it changed the questions that we ask before we buy. Instead of individual titles, we started to see patterns and gaps within gaps. For example, areas like Asian authorship, disability representation, or 2S LGBTQIA+ stories that needed sustained attention. Because budgets are finite and because collections grow slowly, this work asks us to think long-term. Many TLs now create 3- and 5-year purchasing plans with specific outcomes in mind. Plans that are intentional, responsive, and rooted in what their community needs. Collection development becomes future work. Thoughtful, methodical, ongoing. This is the heart of it all.
Now let's look at a proposed library budget before and after a diversity audit. Prior to the audit, my spending was primarily organized by format. I allocated set amounts for novels, picture books, and other things, with less attention paid to the content within those categories. After completing the diversity audit, I approached my budget much more thoughtfully and strategically. As you can see, 8% of my budget is dedicated to strengthening the Indigenous Peoples collection, with a particular focus on Coast Salish and Métis stories. 20% of my budget is allocated to novels. However, the emphasis is now on inclusive and representative storytelling. This includes books featuring 2S LGBTQIA+ characters, protagonists with visible and invisible disabilities, stories that reflect non-nuclear family structures, and titles that are own voice.
I think the power of the diversity audit lies in how the stories connect with the students and the readers who get to experience books written by people like them. When students see an aspect of their identity shared in a book, whether it's their culture, language, their disability, their gender, and they see that there's a story worth telling that's valued, you can often see their eyes light up, that their identity is something to be valued as well. And that's where you have the possibility to not only have kids see themselves in books, but also to have kids see themselves as readers. They are readers for life when a book hooks them on such a personal level and validates who they are. And if you ask any librarian what it's all about, kids seeing themselves as readers, that's everything.
Well, now I see that we are fighting to let the people who aren't seen be seen.
I learned that a lot of stories are missing. I learned that we need to branch and reach into other kinds of books like towards LGBTQ and unhoused people, so other people can see their lives reflected in the book that they're reading.
I learned that we can use our action to actually make a big difference.
Hi there, my name is Elizabeth Mallon. I'm the teacher librarian at Hamilton Elementary in Richmond, BC. And I just wanted to take a minute to share with you why honoring diversity is so important to me as a teacher librarian and so important in the space where I'm honored to be able to connect with students every day and staff and learn and grow with them. We had the privilege to participate in a diversity audit in 2024. The schools that were participating at that time, on average, all of our schools had an 82% white authorship of our collection, and our school in particular had over 90%. So I knew it was high, but I didn't realize it was going to be that high. And it has really helped me just with a lens. I'm constantly looking at different resources and constantly asking myself, are my students and staff reflected in our collection? We have over 24 different languages spoken in our community. We have almost 150 students reporting English as their second language. And so it's so important to me that they are reflected in our collection. So I just wanted to give a few quick examples. For example, we will have an easy reader, Cheat and Fudge, and it's explaining what it is like to be living as a young Sikh boy. We have a growing Indigenous peoples collection where we have many fabulous resources that are from different nations in British Columbia, the Musqueam Nation, and all through Canada and the world. It's nice to have, picture books that are by authors that are from Richmond, our community, and also from British Columbia, where you have two Canadian authors collaborating together. I love that we have books that honor all different abilities, even graphic novels for students. We have, local authors, for example, Johnny Christmas. We have this beautiful story, Flamingo, again, by a diverse author with, not a lot of words, but powerful images that our learners can have access to. When I'm choosing chapter books, I'm now looking, okay, this story tells what it's like to be somebody on the autism spectrum, and I want to make sure that this author is actually also on the autism spectrum, which they are, so I check for that. This, is telling the story of World War II and Hiroshima, and this author is from Japan and actually lived there, so these are the things I'm checking. I am building our first dictionary section. So for example, this is, Tagalog words. We have many students who speak Tagalog or English and Arabic. This is an amazing story that is written in English and Punjabi, which tells the important story of the Kamagata Maru incident. We have also our nonfiction, like biography section. This was part of our Reader's Choice, telling the story of how Larry Kwong was the first person of Asian descent to play in the NHL. Just a few examples of how I am, just really searching out lots of different stories that can really reflect our community and making sure that students see themselves in our collection. It's just so important. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to participate in the diversity audit, and I hope that that opportunity is provided for all teacher librarians in British Columbia. Thank you.
We hope that over the last 30 minutes, we have provided you with the tools that will help you take this process into your own school library and learn about the good work that you are doing, and also identify work that can continue to be done into the future. Please do feel free to share this with your colleagues. This can be a powerful learning opportunity in a staff meeting or in a presentation on a Pro D Day to your colleagues. In our district, diversity audits spread to classroom libraries as well as the school library. For more support and information about this process, we recommend taking a look at the Canadian School Libraries Collection Diversity Toolkit. There are more fantastic support tools there with practical ideas on the process, and it's something that you can share out with your staff, with your principal, vice principal, or anyone else who's interested in doing a diversity audit in their spaces.